So if you happen to keep up with my channel goings on via the community tab, then you'll know for my 80,000 subscriber special I'm going to be making a Maps from Hell episode on the Sonic series, a series started by the Moon Chat, a small GD creator group, as one of the first mega collabs in 1.9 and the biggest of its kind, which has spanned 4 official levels varying in degrees of difficulty, success and reputation by the community. So before this documentary comes out, I want to set a precedent for that video by addressing the elephant in the room that is SubSonic. SubSonic, a forgettable, unloved extreme demon that disappointed the community all round. It is regarded by many as one of the most disappointing sequels to a level in the game's history, and generally its rap is pretty negative. However, I really don't think SubSonic warrants this kind of criticism. I know it's been over a year since it was released, but I think you can still comment on such matters, and hindsight helps to look at these things once the dust has had time to settle. And from this view, I'm fairly confident in saying that SubSonic is not a bad level by any means, nor was it as disappointing as people make it out to be. Chiefly due to one thing: the community didn't know what they were asking for. Many said both 2.1 Sonic levels didn't keep to the formula of Sonic series levels established in 1.9. I will be explaining why this so-called formula was not properly understood. First of all though, let's analyse how it came about. SubSonic was released just under 2 months after Hypersonic was released. Just after 2.1 was released, Viper and the gang immediately picked up the Sonic series, which had been dead since mid-year 2015 due to a failure to launch Hypersonic in 2.0. So 18 months on, a new third Sonic level was to be built and added to Supersonic and Ultrasonic, two of the most famous and well-liked demons in 1.9. Hypersonic was built and released quickly given the lack of progress in 2.0. Viper hired new creators to build faster, and Combined verified it incredibly quickly as he usually does. There was a bit of debate around its difficulty, as at the time it sat on the fence with Cataclysm, towing the line between Insane and Extreme Demon. When released it was rated an Insane Demon, but this quickly went up to Extreme Demon level before being reverted a few months later. There was an interesting debate that arose when the Sonic series was revived, in that Hypersonic did not stick to the original formula, which was from the 2 Sonic levels in 1.9. Many things were pointed out by a small number of people which would in turn follow into SubSonic. Some things picked up on were the structure of the level, the decoration choices, the team selection, and the fact the song choice was not an F77 song like the previous two. The fact Viperin was hosting it and not Xanthic Alpha also became a topic of debate, given Viperin had just come out of a controversial position for having Artificial Ascent, Anubis' mega collab that went on to undoubtedly be one of the best demons ever, uploaded onto his account after Anubis quit the game. The fact the level was not uploaded on the inactive Xanthic Alpha's account also caused many questions to be raised. However, what the community didn't realise is the origin of these mega collabs was the Moon Chat team, which had shared responsibility. The thought that Xanthic owned the series is a misconception. In fact, a fun bit of trivia here is that Xanthic actually got to upload the first 2 levels because he had the most creator points at the time of their creation. Sound familiar? It's exactly what Viperin gets called out for now. Xanthic had his own part in the level just after the drop. On the same day that Hypersonic was released, part of the team released a parody version which was built with bad 1.9 block design, so to mock people saying that Hypersonic didn't stick to this formula. And as Viperin pointed out, 2 1-point levels that were so drastically different do not set a standard for a sequel 2 updates later. After cleverly rising above the criticism, Hypersonic began to manifest itself as the big players started beating it and questions around it fizzled out and turned into praise and love for the level. Sure, it broke a lot of ranks, but it had a refreshing twist on the old level series and everyone was just glad to have it back. Viperin then, in April, previewed a 4th level, SubSonic, and before the community even had time to make shitty montages of it, Combine released the 4th level, this time much harder than Hypersonic and one of the hardest levels in the game. SubSonic was more or less instantly criticised for similar things though: too much of a change in formula, questionable decoration choices and difficulty. SubSonic went down as the weaker of the 2 levels despite breaking into the top 10 hardest demons, and it went alongside Mystic as one of the most disappointing sequels of that period of GD in the community's view. However, I feel the problems with this criticism begin with Hypersonic, and how Hypersonic has flaws that were glossed over due to the stigma of the level and the time of its release. Hypersonic is a level that, unlike its younger brother, was largely well received after the initial inevitable period of fanboy rejection. When the Sonic series was revived, it got a little bit of backlash, sure, but overall it's looked back on quite fondly as a good level. Principally, Hypersonic is seen as the good one and SubSonic the bad one, but I do think that this gets too much praise. Everything that is viewed wrong with SubSonic, Hypersonic has too. SubSonic was criticised for being bland in some parts, but Hypersonic has some very dull and uninspired parts too. Also, the song choice was criticised again, but this is quite strange in my opinion. While I respect other people's choices, it baffles me how so many people actually liked 10,000 by Cold Breaks ahead of Speedbreaker by DJ Jana. While neither of them were F777 songs, I think Speedbreaker was much more Sonic series-like, yet people still prefer the former. I think people liked Hypersonic so much because it was the first big level release in 2.1 from a familiar set of creators. It was a 2.1 level made for the best by the best, and as it was the first look a lot of Fairweather GD fans had of a hard 2.1 level, many liked it. The video view counts speak for themselves here. Also, I think we were just generally really excited to have the series back. Hypersonic could have been a lot worse and we still would have welcomed it with open arms, so long as it showed some resemblance to 1.9. However, the level has some problems outside of the ones that have already been discussed, and the main one is its speed. You'd think for a level named Hypersonic, the third chapter in a series of levels that have thus far been fast paced, the level would be quite fast, but alas, you actually spend a substantial portion of the level going at either 1 times speed or 0.5 times speed. Furthermore, even when it's fast, it's 2 stop start. The sync is good, but this level, for me at least, is just too frustratingly slow. The original 2 levels used 3 times speed changes in abundance. Ultrasonic especially was so hard because it was classed as a speed demon. Hypersonic goes back on this hugely, whereas Subsonic spends a lot of its gameplay going very quickly, at 4 times speed to be precise, taking advantage of the new speed in the update, which is something I would have expected an early 2.1 level such as Hypersonic to do. This also falls in with my criticism of the song, as I said. The sync is good, but I think 10,000 invites slower gameplay, therefore in my opinion making it a worse choice than Speedbreaker for a Sonic level song. The creating team actually picked up on these things and the finer details like this, and were disappointed with what we had made and the initial response it got, and this largely is what brought about SubSonic so much faster. With all this being said, I really am shitting on Hypersonic a lot here. It's not a bad level, in fact it's a good level. However, I just think the weighting of fan support leaning more towards Hypersonic is misplaced. So let's talk about why SubSonic is good. Before I go any further, I will say yes, there are issues with SubSonic, one being its very inconsistent decoration quality. I know this has been picked up on before, but Evasium's part is quite clearly rushed and not his best work at all. But the part that gets a lot of unwarranted criticism in my opinion is XCY7's part. Now XCY7 and I haven't ever really seen eye to eye. I will say that his role as a creator is becoming increasingly harder to please with fans. XCY7 was a good creator in the old days gone by of GD. Much like many of those GS and ex-GS creators who had their best days predating 2.0, they do try and keep their classic style in their contemporary levels and mega collab parts. Heinz is a great example of this. XCY7 is also a great example of this. He was a member of the 1.9 team and is one of the few creators to make it through to SubSonic. And though his part is pretty bland and dull to say the least, the thing is, his part is bland and dull by 2.1 standards. He was definitely trying to get a bit of a classic look in this, essentially trying to keep the Sonic series old style. Yet, his part was criticised for this. When I said at the beginning that the community was asking for continuity but didn't really understand what continuity was, this is what I meant. XCY7's SubSonic part is the closest you can get to the old 1.9 original style without including a part from the parody Hypersonic level. But when this was included, fans didn't like it. I think people suffer too much from looking at the past through rose-tinted glasses and therefore preach it out of principle. A great example is 1.9. Obviously the great and golden age of GD, but there were downsides. For example, the spread of hackers. That would have caused loads of trouble if it were revived now. XCY7 does seem to have an issue with building parts that are too simplistic, hence why his part was thrown out of Fusion Z. But in SubSonic's case, I think he got it fairly right in what he was going for, and his part gets unfairly bashed. Another thing people complain about is that this level was too hard. Now in truth, this isn't a criticism saying it's too hard for the sake of being hard, but it's more about the trade-off. Many people think that they went with difficulty at the price of design, and so the step up to crazy demon difficulty was not necessary. However, for this criticism, I think we need to analyse the two sets of levels in 1.9 and 2.1 in parallel and their respective transitions. Supersonic was an incredibly hard level, but Ultrasonic took it a step up to a near-on extreme demon for its time. Therefore, by default, the two 2.1 Sonic levels were incredibly justified in being difficult. This isn't something like Killbot where the super buff is there just because the level is gaining popularity and is unnecessary. Ultrasonic was, in fact, around the top 10 when it was released in 1.9 and Supersonic was in the top 30 at the same time. Therefore, I don't find it unreasonable that SubSonic was also in the top 10 and 9th place, whilst Hypersonic was sitting comfortably within the top 50. Both levels have the same expected transition in difficulty, and it now forms quite a nice 4-part series. We have a hard demon in the form of Supersonic, a very hard demon in the form of Ultrasonic, an insane demon in Hypersonic, and an extreme demon in SubSonic. The community rejecting the difficulty again goes to illustrate that they were indeed getting Sonic series style, but were rejecting it despite asking for it. One issue I think both 2.1 Sonic levels have is a pretty damning one, is that they were both subconsciously held to the same standard as Artificial Ascent and Digital Descent. Though Digital Descent wasn't out at this point, it was in the works, and Artificial Ascent's building team had a lot of overlap with Hypersonic and SubSonic's team, not least because they were hosted by Vipeprint and all verified by Combined. Artificial Ascent and Digital Descent are two of the best levels on the Demons list, making them the two best extreme demons arguably of all time in terms of difficulty, design, and the balance of factors to deliver on an overall experience. Hypersonic and SubSonic on the other hand have imperfections, and rightly so. They stem from an original level that is incredibly well loved but is gloriously untidy and imperfect, so it stands to reason that the two Sonic levels should have a bit of character, whereas the two Ascent levels are a lot more sterile in design. However, I do believe that some wires got crossed here, as subsequently, especially given they were all combined verified levels, SubSonic and Hypersonic would both look uninspiring next to his two hardest demons. Overall, I think they had a very tough act to follow, because Supersonic and Ultrasonic brought something not only new but groundbreaking and revolutionary to the table in 1.9. As for SubSonic, which is definitely the more harshly judged level, I believe that if it had been released later on in 2.1, say early this year or last year, it would have been appreciated way more than it was. But I think we had too much overexposure to the series with these two special momentous levels in the space of 2 months. Both of these levels were good in their own rights, and both were better than the fan-made ones. Panasonic and Electrosonic were both released by two incredibly large hyped up channels in the community, Guitar Hero Styles and Dorami, and both of these really took away from the series in my opinion. Both were unofficial levels just designed to latch onto the trend for notoriety. Electrosonic isn't too bad of a level, but there's nothing special about it. It just looks like an overly difficult generic level, like an insane demon after evolution. As for Panasonic, well, it wasn't too bad looking, but it just feels like a commercialised version of Subterranean Animism. Over 20% of the level is the outro, and it just feels like a congratulatory level to Guitar the whole way through. I'm not saying don't make a level like this, as Guitar has the fan base and reach to do so, but attaching it to the Sonic series, and bearing in mind this was released within a week of SubSonic, is a bit of a cheap move for Extra Edge. Again, both of these levels were nothing special and they just sought to extend the Sonic series, but more for the personal gain of the verifiers rather than the actual creators. But I feel like I'm being a bit too negative here, but don't expect either of these two levels to have their own sections in the Maps from Hell video, as they aren't official levels. I might give them a mention as fan-made levels, but generally they just both feel like self-serving ventures, which is a shame. So anyway, there's my take on SubSonic. A bit of a weird out of the blue video, but I thought I'd get it out there before the documentary gets released. SubSonic was not a bad level, it had its flaws like all levels do, but generally it stuck to the formula and continued the series way better than anyone gives it credit for. But that is just my opinion. What do you think? What's your take on the series? Did you like or dislike SubSonic? And where do you stand on the points raised in this video? Be sure to have your say in the comments and I'll read all of them. I thank you very much for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please can you smash a like on it, and if you're new around here, if you could consider subscribing so we can reach that 80k milestone soon, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks a lot guys, I'll see you all soon.